The Zelnari general stood in silence, his four crimson eyes scanning the strange, primitive world before him. Earth. A backwater planet on the edge of the galactic frontier. Its inhabitants were fragile creatures, weak in form, ruled by emotion rather than logic. And yet, they had survived. Thrived. Even dared to expand beyond their world. The High Command deemed them unremarkable, but the general wasn't convinced. His mission was simple: observe. Analyze their potential. Determine if they posed a threat. He had studied thousands of species, dissected their military doctrines, broken entire civilizations with strategy alone. Compared to the Zelnari, these humans were nothing more than unrefined chaos wrapped in flesh. Yet something held his gaze. A small human offspring, no more than 6 or 7 planetary cycles old, playing in the dirt. Alone, wielding nothing but a crude wooden stick. A meaningless sight. At first, he dismissed it as primitive amusement, the kind of mindless activity lesser species engaged in to pass time. But as he watched, a flicker of curiosity crept into his mind. The child's movements were deliberate, calculated. He wasn't simply swinging at the air. There was rhythm, precision, a pattern. The general narrowed his gaze. The boy lunged forward, striking an invisible foe, then twisted on his heel, pivoting effortlessly into a defensive stance. His tiny hands adjusted their grip with instinctive finesse, seamlessly shifting between attack and defense. There was no hesitation, no wasted movement. The general's mandibles tightened. This wasn't chaotic flailing. This was a combat form. A structured sequence of engagements. But how? This child was too young for formal training, too unrefined to have learned such techniques. And yet, his stance mirrored that of seasoned warriors. The Zelnari spent decades perfecting their battle forms, training in controlled environments, mastering the science of war. But this was raw, unpolished instinct. A chill settled over the general's mind. He had witnessed countless battlefields, observed elite soldiers from every corner of the galaxy. But never had he seen something so effortlessly lethal in one so young. He activated his data interface, running a comparative analysis. The child's movements aligned with dueling styles from over a dozen warfaring species. There was no logical reason for this. No justification. Unless. The general's gaze darkened. This wasn't learned behavior. It was something far more dangerous. It was innate. The general remained still, his mind processing the implications. He had seen warriors train for years to achieve such fluidity, yet here it was effortless, unconscious. The child struck again, pivoting mid-motion, adjusting his stance to counter an opponent that did not exist. His grip changed, one hand sliding down the stick's length, mimicking leverage control. The movement was too refined to be accidental. The general's secondary arms twitched, a sign of unease. He watched as the child shifted between attack and defense with an ease that should have been impossible. There was no training ground, no instructor, no genetic memory guiding him. This was pure instinct, a mind built for war before it even understood the concept. His interface continued its analysis. The child's movements correlated with close-quarters combat tactics used by elite forces across the galaxy. Not just one species. Many. The footwork mirrored the rapid repositioning of the Karthak shock troops. The fluid parries bore resemblance to the Zelnari's own blade formations. Even the deceptive feints were similar to the dueling arts of the fallen Tyran warlords. But this was a human child. A species that, by galactic standards, had barely left their planet. The implications gnawed at him. Had he underestimated them? The High Command viewed humanity as an anomaly, aggressive, yes, but undisciplined. A species that stumbled through war rather than mastering it. But this was something else. It was not practice. It was not repetition. It was adaptation. The child pressed forward, eyes focused, responding to an enemy that only he could see. He adjusted as if reacting to invisible strikes, rolling his shoulder to absorb impact, shifting his stance in anticipation of an incoming attack. There was no fear, no hesitation. Only movement. Precision. Then, without warning, he switched styles entirely. The rigid, Practiced strikes dissolved into something unpredictable, wild, aggressive, but still controlled. His stance became erratic, movements sharper, faster. The general recognized the shift immediately. Adaptive combat. A trait found only in the deadliest warriors. A slow realization settled over him. This wasn't something humanity had developed over time. This was in them, buried in their very biology. This was why they survived wars that should have wiped them out. Why they excelled in conflict where others faltered. The general's mandibles tightened. The Zelnari trained their soldiers for decades to perfect the art of war. Humanity did not need time. They did not need instruction. They were born for it. The general's thoughts raced. If a mere child displayed such instinctive combat ability, what did that mean for the adults of this species? He had always believed warfare was a discipline, a science that required meticulous study and refinement. Yet here was proof that, for humans, it was something far worse, something natural. He pulled up historical records. Wars spanning centuries, conflicts that should have destroyed them, yet only made them stronger. Every battle forced innovation. Every loss fueled adaptation. The Zelnari required extensive training regimens to teach battle tactics, yet humans absorbed them through experience, through necessity. They learned war the same way they learned to walk, by doing. The data was irrefutable. The greatest warriors in the galaxy refined techniques over generations. Humans, by comparison, had perfected the art of combat in mere centuries. They lacked genetic enhancements, yet they outperformed bioengineered species. They lacked technological supremacy, yet they overwhelmed far superior forces through sheer unpredictability. Their history was a testament to one undeniable truth: when faced with destruction, they did not break. They evolved. The general's unease deepened. The Zelnari had studied countless warfaring civilizations, but they had miscalculated. They had assumed humanity's aggression was reckless, their survival a result of stubborn resilience. But that was a dangerous misinterpretation. Humans did not just fight wars. They became war. The child continued his imaginary battle, his body moving with an ease that should have taken years to master. He was not following a set pattern. He was adjusting in real time, responding to enemies that weren't even there, refining his approach with every movement. Adapting. And that was the true danger. Humans did not rely on instinct alone. They learned. They evolved mid-conflict. No species had ever demonstrated such an ability on this scale. They did not require superior strength, nor advanced weaponry. Their greatest weapon was their own relentless drive to improve. The general now understood the unspoken warning hidden within their history. Every time humanity was threatened, they did not merely survive. They emerged stronger, smarter, more efficient. The Zelnari had considered them an emerging force. That was a mistake. They were not emerging. They were awakening. The child let out a triumphant laugh, raising his stick high as if claiming victory. He had no idea what he had just proven. No idea that he had unraveled everything the general thought he understood about warfare. For the first time in his long career, the general felt something unfamiliar. Not mere respect. Not admiration. Something deeper. Something colder. Fear. He had seen species with superior technology, with biological enhancements far beyond human capability. Yet none of them unnerved him like this. Because none of them needed to fight the way humans did. None of them treated combat as something woven into their very nature. The Zelnari had believed that their structured, methodical approach to war made them the pinnacle of military evolution. But what was strategy against something that could not be predicted? What was experience against something that learned faster than it could be countered? He recorded his final observations. Humanity's true strength is not in their weapons, nor their tactics. It is not in their numbers or their alliances. It is in their very essence. They are creatures of war before they ever set foot on a battlefield. They do not need to be taught how to fight. It is written into their bones. His mandibles tightened as he considered what this meant for the future. The High Command believed humanity was manageable, containable. He now understood the danger in that assumption. Humanity was not merely another rising species. They were something far more dangerous, something that, if provoked, could not be stopped. He turned away, unwilling to watch further. The child had already returned to his game, unaware of the weight of his actions. He had never set foot in a war zone. Had never been trained. Had no understanding of what he was doing. And yet, he had just demonstrated why his kind would one day rule the battlefield. The Zelnari had thought themselves superior. They had thought humanity's survival was a fluke, a temporary anomaly. They were wrong. And if they were not careful, they would not live to correct that mistake.